And I think that's super silly. Like, I don't think we should have altcoins today. They shouldn't exist. We just fundamentally believe, like, one side believes that value is created by saving, and the other believes that value is created by working.
And today we are going to be joined by someone that's famous in the blockchain space as the chief Bitcoin historian at CoinGeek, has been a Bitcoiner since 2012. And I can tell you, I follow his tweets. He's very trustworthy. He's very calm. I saw a lot of his videos with debates, and at the same time, very passionate at what he does. So let us all welcome Sir Kurt Wuckert Jr.
Hey, glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure. So Kurt, let's start. Tell us more about your background and how you were able to get introduced to Bitcoin.
So totally by accident. I was a entrepreneur. I owned a printing company, and I used to go to rallies all the time about sound money, so politics stuff. But I'm from Chicago, so we had a Federal Reserve branch basically in town, and I was opposed to fiat currency. I was a big gold standard advocate. I've been a Mises Institute follower since I was like a teenager. So just super into all of that stuff. And one of the guys that I met by going to those rallies asked if he could pay me in Bitcoin to print him some posters for the next rally. And it was like a $50 job. So I was like, yeah, whatever. Like, I don't know what this is, but that's fine. And ultimately, it was one of the most pivotal moments of my life. And but about a year later, I didn't really do much. Like, I say I started in Bitcoin in 2012, but I didn't really start to go down the rabbit hole until 2013. And then I got super into it. I was super active on Facebook. Like, I wanted to learn anything that I could from anybody. So I was, putting up flags everywhere. Like, hey, who knows more about this? I want to start a mining operation. I want to do all these other things. And did a bunch of stuff like that. We ran a Bitcoin mining from 2013 to 15. Did do real well with it because just timing. Like, I was like right in the era when difficulty to mine went up like the most significantly. So rough timing on that. But then I got into mining Ethereum with the GPUs that I had. In 2017, I ended up doing, I co-founded a group called Crypto Traders Pro, which was to teach people like how to manage their portfolio and how to do, I was the fundamental analyst. So it was up to me to like teach people about Bitcoin in a basic sense.
All right.
I'm just on and on and on and on. I've just been full-time in Bitcoin for really since 2017 is when I went full-time, and I've been here ever since.
Awesome. I heard you say sound money. So for people who are not familiar with the term, what do you mean by sound money?
So it's the opposite of fiat. So fiat currency is money that is changeable. Either there is a person or people who can vote or by decree change the nature of the money, the value of the money, the interest rates of the money, whatever. The opposite of that, a sound money is something where the supply is consistent, it's auditable, it's knowable, it's fungible, it's recognizable and transferable. So this would be something like gold, for example. Like gold has a certain value at any given time. And if it's pure gold and it's 1 ounce, you know that it is worth whatever it is today, $1,800 or something. And so a hard money system or a sound money system is one that you can't just arbitrarily change the supply. You can't just make more gold. You can mine it, but there's work that goes into it, and the amount of gold that comes out is roughly predictable, especially over time. But just two very different concepts around what is money.
I see. And how does this sound money or hard money connect to Bitcoin? You can also go through this telling the whole,
So
go ahead.
Bitcoin is beautiful in that it is finite, it is limited, and it is publicly auditable. The problem with gold is it's expensive to transport, it's heavy. You can only keep so much gold in your pockets. There's a security risk for storing it. And there's also the possibility that you start a new gold mine and you find an incredibly large chunk of gold, and then it raises the supply of gold and lowers the value and all of that. Bitcoin does this very differently. There is a very, very clear protocol enforced schedule by which Bitcoins come into circulation. And that's, at the beginning, it was 50 coins per block. So every 10 minutes, 50 coins would come out. After the first 210,000 blocks of Bitcoin, or roughly 4 years, it was cut in half to 25. And then the same cycle again, half to 12 and a half. And then 6 1/4, which is how many Bitcoins are mined every 10 minutes today. There's 6 1/4 Bitcoins every block. And that will continue to diminish until we reach just about 21 million total Bitcoins. And anybody can audit the public supply at any time. You can trace every Bitcoin from the time it was mined until the time when it's arrived in any wallet that exists on the Bitcoin network. And so it is a perfect sound money system in that you can audit it. Anybody can audit it. Anybody can see what the circulating supply is at any time. You can see the state of all Bitcoins at any time. And that's the beauty of it. There's no hidden board of directors or anybody that can just make more Bitcoin. So, yeah.
I see. Because whenever I talk about a Bitcoin to people, the way I show them the magic is that I tell them to go to what's on chain or something and say, oh, type 0. And then you can see 2009. It's like all of the transactions from 2009 until this minute, everything's being recorded, and and you can verifiably publicly prove it. That's like the concept that I understood. So how did this Bitcoin, how was the Bitcoin journey? And then what happened along the way that caused this civil war and eventually to this split?
So just like everything else, human nature is the problem, right? So when Bitcoin got started, there was immediate discussion of what Bitcoin is actually for. So you have people that have very strong political opinions about money, sound money specifically, because it's something that libertarians have been fighting for generations now, that the money supply should be pegged to something that is auditable, and government shouldn't be able to just inflate currency to pay for wars and all the other stuff.
Right.
And that's great. I agree with that. The problem is that I also agree that Bitcoin was designed to do those things, but also be a peer-to-peer electronic cash system, which is the title of the Bitcoin white paper. And if you read just the introduction, I would encourage you to just read page 1, and you will see very clearly what Satoshi Nakamoto intended to disrupt with Bitcoin. But my opinion is unpopular. And the reason it's unpopular is that so many people looked at Bitcoin and said, okay, it's finite and it's valuable. So what makes sense is for me to do nothing but accumulate Bitcoin, because as value accrues, I want to be the guy who accumulated as much as possible and spent none. And that's done very well for a handful of people. But the other side is, well, what is it used for? Like, it's a cash system, so should we not use it as cash? And so this became ultimately like, okay, what direction should the roadmap of Bitcoin go? Small blockers believe that Bitcoin is not intended to be spent, and that the blockchain is intended to stay as small as possible. So they believe that there should only be 1 megabyte of data allowed in each Bitcoin block, to make sure that as many people as possible can run the whole blockchain on as small and cheap of equipment as possible, because that is what they believe will make the most secure and robust network on Earth. I disagree. I would argue that it is not robust. It is rickety when it's that way. I believe that if people are transacting real value, if people are generating fundamental economic value, building businesses that cannot be built in any other way, that the block size should not be decided by protocol developers or by political philosophers, that the block size limit should be decided by how much demand is there in the real economy for Bitcoin transactions. And it's really just one of those things where we just have a very different economic philosophy. In 2017, it finally all came to a head, and there was a split of the Bitcoin network. So the big blockers split, and we got the BCH ticker, and then the small blockers got the BTC ticker, and they declared victory because they kept the ticker, but there was a bunch of nasty stuff that went into that. And then ultimately there's been a handful of such splits. I have stood by the biggest block version of Bitcoin every time that there's been an opportunity to pick a side. And so I am by default a Bitcoin SV or a BSV blockchain advocate. because it is the original implementation of Satoshi Nakamoto's vision for Bitcoin re-implemented. It's the only one that has Bitcoin the way that Satoshi programmed it, with a full general purpose computation stack that you can build on. You can build apps, you can run smart contracts and all the kind of stuff that people think of for Ethereum. And then ultimately, it is a sound system that doesn't change via soft forks and debates and all this other stuff, which is what you want a sound money to do. A sound money should not change, right? So I believe that if a sound money is not to change, then we need to, at the very least, implement it the way that it was originally implemented in order to follow that roadmap.
Interesting. When I was watching some of your videos and you were commenting that, let's get into like this details wherein people talk about like the hash war or this attack, but I heard you and it changed my mind when you explained that when there's like a hash war, it just means that whoever has the strongest hash power, then people will just use that implementation. But in this case, when the BTC and BCH, it's also like they literally separated where it's supposed to just go one way, right? How does that work?
So the way that both of these happened is you can fight for a split. Like when a network splits because of a disagreement over rules, you can fight for it, and then whoever has the most hash power should orphan the other side. So one version of it should frankly die. Right. There's also a possibility to treat it like if somebody has just broken a bunch of egregious rules, well, then it shouldn't really matter. So this is like in a revolution or a coup d'etat, for example. Like, let's say some invading army shows up and kills your king. Right. You know, if I'm, let's say I'm French and some German invader shows up and kills my French king and says, "This is Germany now, you're German." Well, this doesn't make me German. I am still French, you know? And so it's a little bit one of those things where, okay, yes, they have more hash power and they have more value on their network, but they ultimately broke unbreakable rules. And so if you take like a philosophical standpoint, you start to say, well, look, the real Bitcoin is the one that follows Bitcoin's rules, because Bitcoin is nothing if not a network designed to enforce the rules of hard money. And so it's a nuanced position, and it is ultimately an unpopular position, but it is the position I've taken because I would be that guy. You know, if there was some invading army, I'd be the guy saying like, nope, I'm sorry, I don't consent to this, and I'm not party to it just because you're stronger than me. So that's kind of my rebellious streak. Deciding to be what it is.
Got it. Now let's move back for a while, and I'm not sure if you're familiar about how the Ethereum was founded because Bitcoin couldn't handle certain things. Can you talk about it a little bit so people understand?
Yes. So Bitcoin, amid this civil war, Bitcoin was changed heavily. Really starting in 2011, when Satoshi Nakamoto sort of disappeared from the scene. Immediately there was like a power vacuum, and there were developers who were very talented at software, but they looked at the Bitcoin stack, the code, and said, I don't know what the security risks are of just letting this be the way that it is. It's kind of like, I don't even know, let's say you're a 12-year-old kid and you find your dad's race car, you know, and it's like, should I get in and drive this thing, or should I, you know, maybe we should make sure that the speedometer doesn't allow me to go over 65 miles per hour just because I don't know what I'm doing, right? And so that was basically what they did, is they turned a bunch of stuff off. Now, Bitcoin was always capable of running like tokens, for example. You could build NFTs on Bitcoin in 2009 if you were to just do it. Nobody did it, but you could have done it. Vitalik Buterin was an author for Bitcoin Magazine back in the day. He was very aware of, in theory, some of the stuff that you could do on Bitcoin, but ultimately the debate about whether or not you should was so strong and made it that it basically just didn't make any sense to invest in building that sort of technology on Bitcoin, because it seemed like, and he was right, that the community wanted to just turn off everything that wasn't about making it a store of value. And I think that's super silly. Like, I don't think we should have altcoins today. They shouldn't exist. But the reason they exist is because they turned off all of the stuff that you can do on Ethereum today. And so Ethereum is more of like a general purpose supercomputer in the cloud, right? It's a distributed computer that you can create applications with. And that's its big selling point. Now, the problem is Ethereum fundamentally didn't understand Bitcoin, which is why Ethereum gas fees are, $500 a transaction sometimes. And that should never be the case on a Bitcoin network. And so BSV is a perfect example of, okay, we're going to do the right thing here. We're going to restore the Bitcoin protocol and allow people to build smart contracts that 1 billion people on Earth can use at the same time, and the fees stay less than a penny. So you don't perceive the fee. Like, it still works, it still pays the miners to do their job, but ultimately Ethereum shouldn't exist, and neither should like the 15,000 other coins and tokens that exist. They should all be on Bitcoin. They would be more secure, they'd be more quick, and they would be cheaper to deploy if we never had this stupid civil war. The whole world should run on Bitcoin today. And instead, we're a weird niche investment market that almost nobody understands at all.
Right. I was watching this Jack Pitts interview, and he said that, this Vitalik dude didn't understand what he was doing. What he gave it another idea. He said what he should have done is literally just implement the Bitcoin protocol and then just call it Ethereum, and it would work like magic.
He should have. He absolutely should have. He didn't get it. Like, he thought that Bitcoin, basically he didn't think that Bitcoin could be used as a general purpose computer. And he was wrong. And it's not his fault that he was wrong. Truly, nobody knew that it could be.
Hindsight.
We didn't find this out until 2015 when Dr. Craig Wright showed up on the scene and started going to basically Bitcoin meetups and explaining to people like, hey, by the way, we can do, like, did you know you can run Turing complete computations and smart contracts on Bitcoin? The whole crowd's like, wait, no, you can't. Isn't that what Ethereum's for? And he's, oh, no, you can do all of this. And people still actually even debate whether it's true, which is ridiculous because it's been proven to be true. But, people don't want to be proven wrong. So
I see. Interesting. Now you have mentioned Dr. Craig, right? And of course, when you mention that man and everyone just goes crazy for some reason, I also actually, my profile picture in Twitter before was like, I also had a laser eye on. And whenever I hear like BSV, I'd be like, scam, because the whole notion is all about the price, really. But can you elaborate, like, what's the utility of BSV and how useful is it versus current BTC with Lightning implementation?
Sure. Well, man, that's a bunch of things.
Sure.
BSV today, if the world wanted to launch a blockchain powered application that the whole world needed to use, BSV is the only blockchain that could handle it. Like, you couldn't do it on XRP, you couldn't do it on Ethereum, you couldn't do it on Polygon, you couldn't do it on Solana. You can't do it. Right. So if you needed 1 billion people to use a blockchain tomorrow, it would have to be BSV. So that's the end of the story right there, as far as I'm concerned. But comparatively, BTC can only handle about 6 megabytes per hour across the network globally. So if you can't fit it into 6 megabytes an hour, tough. Like, you need to pay extra to get in front of whoever is in that 6 megabytes if you really need to get in there. And that sucks. And that's why the fees are so volatile in BTC. That's why sometimes it's 15 cents and sometimes it's $15 and sometimes it's $50 to send a BTC transaction. Now, they claim that Lightning Network solves this, and it sort of does, but it really depends what problem you're trying to solve with Bitcoin in the first place. So yes, you can transact across Lightning Network for essentially free. The problem with it is there's not really a reason to be using Bitcoin. There's not a reason to use BTC in that situation. Like, Lightning Network could sit atop of all kinds of other things. Like, the unit of account doesn't need to be BTC. And the reason is that it's not even actually a layer 2. It's not built on BTC. It is not in the stack. It's not an application of BTC.
So it's not inside.
Correct. It's not in, on, above, around. It is a separate network. It has its own nodes. It's what you're doing is you're taking your Bitcoin, your BTC, you're putting it in a smart contract, and you are issuing the token on a different network. It's exactly the same as wrapped BTC on Ethereum. Like, you're locking coins up and you are reissuing a token that looks and sounds and has the same relative value as what you have on the blockchain. And then you're using it indiscriminately. Now, if you are sending Satoshis around without proof of work, and it can go from me to you and you to, Dave in Tampa, and then from Dave in Tampa to, Kim in North Korea, or whatever you want to do, you're sending all this stuff around on Lightning Network, but you never do proof of work for each of those transactions. Do you know what we call that in Bitcoin? We call that a double spend. We call this a coin that has not been settled to the blockchain, that has been sent to another person. And so they all, but it's a payment channel. It's all this. It's L2. Well, it's not L2. It's a separate network. So I think the closest simile to what Lightning Network actually is, it's like having a bar tab. So if I go to the bar, I open up a tab and say, I'm going to drink here for 3 or 4 hours. I'll settle up my 5 drinks at the end of the night. That's fine. That's a totally valid thing to do with your time or your life or whatever. But I am in no way scaling Mastercard or Visa or whatever I use to pay my bill at the end of the night. This is not a scaling solution. We have not made Mastercard better. We haven't made Visa better. It certainly doesn't make Bitcoin better. It is just a separate side pot where you're doing a thing. Ultimately, Lightning Network doesn't really allow application development. It doesn't have a Turing complete script stack. You can do some things if you attach other networking tools to it to sort of mimic smart contracts and stuff, but it's ultimately it's just send from person A to person B, and that's how it works. And that's Lightning Network. It just is kind of whatever. It's a totally separate thing that it's built under the premise that Bitcoin doesn't matter, that the rules of sending a Bitcoin don't matter. Like it's just the whole thing. I don't like it at all. It's not disruptive in my opinion. And ultimately very few people are using it. So that's the situation.
Perfect. Well, people kind of confused about it. It's hard to run a node and stuff. And I said, just download Handcash. You'll experience the real Bitcoin. Like, when I first, the person who invited me to BSV was Diego on Twitter. Yeah, all of my posts, he's always commenting. It's like, it's digital gold. There's no like that in white paper. I'm like, who reads the white paper anyway? Until you actually think about it. Like if you're into Bitcoin and you don't even like take a look at the white paper, then it's just like being a Catholic or a Christian and not looking at the main source of the text, right? Something like that.
I say the same thing all the time. You can call yourself a Christian, but if you don't believe in Christian things, you're not a Christian. Sorry.
All right. So I also hear you talk about this Mastercard thing and behind the scenes. Tell me your take on this and how it affected Bitcoin.
Yes.
Bitcoin's growth.
So Bitcoin obviously was a payments technology. It is a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. So who is threatened most by that? Mastercard, Visa, the payment companies, basically. So in 2014, Mastercard Ventures established a incubator called Digital Currency Group. Digital Currency Group was designed to both invest in and lead the roadmaps of companies in the blockchain space to make sure that whatever they did was ultimately beneficial to the portfolio and the profits of Mastercard, the company. That's not just them. It's also New York Life Insurance, the World Bank, AXA Insurance, like some of these other like big old money institutions saying, hey, let's figure out who's building blockchain stuff and let's pay them to build it the way we want them to build it. This is how every industry works, actually. If I was to develop a cancer cure and it costs $10 per person to create, I should expect for Pfizer and Moderna and some of these other companies to say, hey, we would love to pay you to work for us. We will patent your thing and we'll sell it for $1,000 a dose instead. How's that sound?
Right. Like a repackaged thing.
If I want to be a billionaire, that's fine. I can decide to say yes. If I say no, I may well wind up dead. So, and I think that's a lot what happened is that they went to these people who were almost entirely volunteer developers. The people that developed Bitcoin were not professional Bitcoin developers. They had day jobs or doing other things. Right. And MasterCard, through Digital Currency Group and a couple other incubators and hedge funds and stuff, said, hey, here's $40-50 million. We're going to start a company called Blockstream. Blockstream will be a professional Bitcoin development company with a whole bunch of resources and staff and all kinds of cool stuff. and you can work for them and you can get a salary to work on Bitcoin full time. But what you're going to do is you're going to follow the roadmap that we give you. And the roadmap is to commercialize side chains under the premise that Bitcoin cannot scale. And so they became.
Let me just clarify. What is sidechain? What do you mean by that?
So a side chain is you can spin up a smart contract through a transaction that creates basically just creates a separate blockchain that has an anchor point to your existing blockchain, but can have its own rules. So it can be faster blocks or different privacy or different settlement rules and all kinds of things. But it ultimately makes its way back and settles on the main chain at some point. So this is the notion behind things like Mastercoin, Counterparty. These are all token protocols that used to exist on Bitcoin and no longer work because BTC always changes. But so the interesting thing is that if Bitcoin could scale, it doesn't need anybody, right? It doesn't need somebody to create some new solution like Lightning Network. Now, curiously enough, Lightning Labs is also in the same portfolio. Digital Currency Group, Mastercard Ventures, all the rest of them. So they created Blockstream, they created Lightning Labs. They also own companies like Coinbase and Kraken and BitGo, Fireblocks, Abra. They own Grayscale Trusts, which is the largest.
Grayscale Trust. Wow. Huge.
Yeah. They own another 100 or so companies. They own the who's who in the blockchain space. And so what they told us is Bitcoin doesn't scale. And so we need to develop a thing that you use in order to use Bitcoin. So they are making money by keeping Bitcoin in a small box, but making as much money as possible on all the things that they are selling you as like add-on services to Bitcoin. And that includes custody exchanges, using your Bitcoin on a Mastercard, for example, like, hey, we'll exchange your Bitcoin for fiat right when you swipe. Isn't that convenient? And blah, blah, blah. Well, that just keeps them in a position where they're in power, they're making money, and Bitcoin doesn't disrupt their business model. So people call me a conspiracy theorist when I bring this up. And I'm like, you can just Google it. Like you can read this for yourself inside of about 3 minutes. Like this is not absurd. This is FBI secret. People know.
I see. Interesting. So based on my understanding, it's like they're trying to cut other things from Bitcoin and create a different product to serve this need, since Bitcoin can't scale.
It's like, imagine your company is, selling crutches. And so you go around hoping people break their legs. But if people get too good at not breaking their legs, maybe you start breaking legs, in secret just to make sure your business is okay.
Understood.
Like that's basically what it is. It's just like, it's a little bit insidious, but ultimately, Mastercard's a fine company. I'm not saying they're all evil or anything like that. Right. I swipe my Mastercard when I go buy, groceries and stuff too. But ultimately, we need to recognize them for what they are. And they have a conflict of interest investing in something like Bitcoin, which is supposed to be a decentralized competitor to people like Mastercard.
Interesting. So to people who are curious, just do a bit of a Google search and find out for yourself, right? Kurt already gave some details, and if you're really interested in it, follow him on Twitter. So Kurt, let's go back to Dr. Craig Wright, right? But the question first is, why not Hal Finney? Why not Adam Back? Or why not other people? And then we'll go with Craig after.
So Hal Finney actually is arguably, a creator of Bitcoin. Like he was the first guy to run, or maybe the first or second guy to run a node. As I understand it, he helped develop some of the software before it was even actually released. So it's kind of one of these things where it's like, who builds a building, right? Like if you look at a famous building and you go say, who built this? Right. Well, the answer is thousands of people built it, but who you typically remember is the architect, right? So there's the guy that came up with what was necessary to make this building possible. Because you can hire any number of bricklayers or people that do drywall or whatever else. Like that's all. There's thousands of people that could do that job. A few thousand people did do that job, but there's one architect.
Right.
And so Hal Finney really fundamentally misunderstood Bitcoin in a lot of ways, but he was a great software programmer. Same with like Nick Szabo, Adam Back. Like these guys are all good software guys, but they all really misunderstood and frankly disagreed with Satoshi Nakamoto about the way that Bitcoin was supposed to work. And it's that it's secured by economics, like it's a probabilistic thing. It's not perfect. And that's actually really what pisses off most of the people that don't like Satoshi, is that Satoshi very deliberately designed it in a way that is imperfect, because there's that certain sauce where you need like a person to drive the car, for example. And like, this is, people saying like, why can't every car be an automated thing? And it's like, well, because a computer can recognize a lot of things. Machine learning is very cool, but like, it can't solve everything. Like there are just variables that require a human. Now, a computer might do more things better on average, and that would be a net good. And this is how the cypherpunk mind works, is that I can create a perfect system. I can create a system that is better than humans participating in the system. And Satoshi Nakamoto disagreed. Satoshi Nakamoto really liked human action. He liked the notion of proactive operators of nodes in Bitcoin and things. And so Adam Back never understood this. He never understood Bitcoin. He argued with Satoshi's basic premises. And you can, we're blessed that we can read tons and tons of stuff that Satoshi wrote about Bitcoin. This is actually why I have a job as a Bitcoin historian. I write articles about like, here's what Satoshi thought about this subject. And, people read it and they're like, that's impossible. And it's like, no, you can read his emails. You can read his forum posts. And guys like Adam, Adam's the CEO of Blockstream. Like Adam makes money based on keeping Bitcoin small, in direct opposition to what Satoshi Nakamoto said about Bitcoin. Same with basically every other candidate that I've ever heard. They're BTC, like they're focused on price. They just ignore everything about it being an electronic cash system and the incentives of the network and everything else. And so if you take a fair look at it, all of these Satoshi candidates don't really work. Like they have opinions that are directly contradictory to the opinions of Satoshi Nakamoto. And, if they could explain why they changed their mind, like that would be one thing, but they all just say, no, this is what Bitcoin just means. And like, sorry, I just know for a fact that Satoshi said very different things than what you're saying he said. And so it's just a fallacy. And then on the flip side, the first time I saw Craig Wright speak, it's probably 2017. This was before there were any forks or any of that nonsense. And he talked about Bitcoin the way that Satoshi talked about Bitcoin. And that's what stood out to me. I'm like, oh, hey, finally somebody bringing up like tokenization and Turing complete scripts and being able to run a decentralized autonomous corporation. Like people call these DAOs now and think they were invented in Ethereum. There's video of Craig Wright talking about them in 2014, built on Bitcoin, and people saying like, "Oh, what? What is a DAC or DAO? Like what does that mean?" And so like he's literally teaching people these things about Bitcoin that weren't even discovered by other blockchain experts for years in the future. And so he's bringing up these things that like I noticed by paying very close attention to Bitcoin, but we're very unpopular because most people don't ever get past the like, it's scarce and I can buy it on Coinbase and then I'm going to be rich in a few years. And that's as far as most people go. And Craig just was able to keep going deeper and deeper and deeper on like, not even like technicals, but it's like the philosophical, the worldview that goes into architecting something like Bitcoin. And like, there's just those little cues that if you really understand the system deeply, you notice its creator. Basically it's another religious reference. It's like, how do you know there's a God? And it's like, well, I haven't met him and I don't see him on a regular basis, but like the world that I perceive makes more sense knowing he's there because of all these things. But it's an individual experience situation.
Interesting. So you heard him speak in person 2017, correct?
Not in person. No, it was, I actually didn't even think I met Craig until probably 2019.
Oh, okay.
But I mean, I'd been on video calls with him and stuff. I think it was 2018 is probably the first time I ever was on like a Zoom call or whatever. Mm-hmm. But in 2017, he gave a speech, the Arnhem Bitcoin meetup. And it was a scaling conference. And it was basically, they were trying to figure out like, hey, are we going to split the network or what are we really going to do here? Because this is all kind of coming to a head. And Craig just gave like the most fiery speech I've ever seen. And I mean, just really laid it on people about like, no, if you don't mine a block, you don't run a node and you don't govern Bitcoin. And this is how Bitcoin works. And Satoshi Nakamoto was not kidding when he designed the governance model of Bitcoin, period. And so, yeah.
Right.
But you can go see it. It's on YouTube. The Arnhem, it's ARNHEM conference, Bitcoin.
Right. Arnhem, like it's a meetup, right? Before when there wasn't mainstream yet, and people were
it was much smaller than a lot of the things look like today.
Right. During the time, since you're the historian, during the time that he left, do you think that it was because he got scared with this like illegal Silk Road thing? Was that a factor that he could go into jail or something?
Probably a little bit. Craig, like at this point, we're trusting Craig's opinion, and I know a lot of people don't want Craig to be Satoshi, so then it's ultimately like a journalistic narrative thing. But according to Craig, it was a couple of things. He was going through a divorce with his wife, basically over Bitcoin because he spent so much time working on it and bootstrapping it, and that caused him some marital strife. Then he also had the opportunity to take another, like a contract job through another work opportunity, basically. He's a consultant to all kinds of things in cybersecurity and digital forensics. So he took another high-paying gig in that era. And then also, yes, like the Silk Road stuff and kind of the crackdown on the old days of Bitcoin was kind of coming to a head. And ultimately, he's the issuer of it, and therefore, like, has a big price on his head. So he disappeared for a number of years at that point. Yeah.
Interesting. And I wanted to clarify to people what does decentralized mean? Because people just use this word, and in terms of this Bitcoin, when in the white paper, what was decentralized? What does it mean? Really?
So the word decentralized does not appear in the Bitcoin white paper. A lot of people think it does. Satoshi, as I understand it, Satoshi maybe only said the word once or twice himself. And he said it on the release date. And what he said is, it is completely decentralized from day one. So when people talk about that, maybe it wasn't decentralized, or maybe has become more decentralized, like they're not really defining the word. In computer science, a decentralized network is a network that can't be taken down if you knock off one point of failure. That's it. That's all it means. So if you have 3 nodes on the network and you knock down one and the network stays up because there's still 2 nodes, that is a sufficiently decentralized network. That's it.
Like
now, people have redefined it to mean all kinds of, it needs to be more decentralized. We need 50,000 nodes. We need all this other stuff. And it just really doesn't make sense. It's not even really a sliding scale. You are either decentralized or you are not. And if you need to do more than knock one node off the network to take the network down, then you're decentralized, and that's it.
Interesting. So I know we're nearing the end here. I just wanted to ask you, like, how did you get involved into this GorillaPool thing and mining? Like, tell us your story here, and what's the future?
I'm actually wearing a GorillaPool t-shirt right now, yeah. But we basically, the Gorilla DAO was established last year. I became a member. I liked the idea. And we had a sizable treasury, and people were debating what to do with it. And I said, let's start a mining pool. I have some mining experience. I haven't done it in a while, but let's see if we can mine some BSV. And one other guy jumped in, my buddy Root, and who's now my business partner in the thing. He said, hey, you know what? I'm running a little bit of infrastructure myself, but let's do it. And so we did it. And now we've been going about 6 months, and we ended up buying the pool from the DAO. So now it is a wholly owned private corporation out of Florida. Oh, okay. And that's it. I mean, we're a mining pool. We mine like 5 or 6 blocks a day, and that's it, man.
Interesting. So when so it means that you have a very deep knowledge in the space. I just wanted to clarify this nodes thing, because people, although it hasn't, I don't know if it's like proven like how it really works. Does their Raspberry really validate the data centers, or how does it work? Can you let us know about it?
So in typical IT terms, a node is any endpoint on a network, right? Okay. That's a typical understanding of a network node. And that's what most people treat BTC nodes when they talk about nodes. They're talking about every endpoint on the network that has a full copy of the blockchain is a node. But Satoshi Nakamoto very clearly gave a definition for a Bitcoin node. And a Bitcoin node is a endpoint on the network which validates blocks by building blocks. And so in my opinion, and in the opinion really of the BSV community in general, but very much not the opinion of everybody else, you can only be a node if you have the ability to build a block. And there can only be I think it's 2016 nodes can build a block during every difficulty adjustment period, right, because that's just how many blocks there are in each difficulty period. And so to say that like BTC has 20,000 or 50,000 or whatever they say, like, right, no, that is not the case. You have that many endpoints, but a node is at the center of the network. It is a node that can build a block and successfully propagate a block such that somebody else will build a block on it. Right. And that's the Bitcoin definition of a node. Satoshi was very clear about this. But people want to change it because they want it to be like, again, this is being more decentralized by having more nodes. Right. And those are both false premises. So you start building false premises on other false premises and your narrative just gets like super out of whack.
Mm-hmm. And I see this Bitcoin Mining Council by Michael Saylor. Like, are also other fork people, Bitcoin people, also invited to that council? And how does it contribute to the future?
I never got an invitation, but Michael Saylor's got me blocked on Twitter for questioning his brilliance. So
interesting. And people talk about it in BSV as a ruthless competition between nodes, and other people say it's like a system that works as one and just like competes to build a block. What's the future of mining? And is the vision also like countries running nodes? How does it work?
I think so. So for me, I look at Bitcoin and I say, there's not going to be massive hashing right now. There's so much profit in hashing that's what people think mining is supposed to be, right, but it's actually not. A miner's job is to propagate transactions, to send transactions from person A to person B, reconcile the ledger such that it is a secure ledger. That's all they do. And hash power isn't part of that. The securing or the propagation of transactions is something that the other parts of the node do. Hashing is the way that it is because of the subsidy. And when you have a subsidy in an economy, you have weird behavior that chases that subsidy for profit. You see this all the time. This is why you see like, Section 8 housing or whatever, just turns into like everybody who lives there is a drug dealer. And it's because, well, my life is subsidized, so I get to think about really clever ways to make extra money doing other things. And it's the exact same thing in the Bitcoin economy. So hashing will go down. Hash rate will lower. Like this is because it will cease to be competitive as that subsidy shrinks and shrinks and shrinks. And ultimately what will make the most sense is who has the nodes that are the most capable of propagating transactions really, really well. So it is going to be a race for connectivity rather than a race for hash power and electrical dominance. And not many people understand this because they don't think that Bitcoin can scale. So they're building all of this infrastructure going in a direction that they really, really don't understand. Right. So that's what the future looks like to me. It's less hash power, greater connectivity, and tons and tons and tons of transactions.
Mm-hmm. Because I understood that in the Bitcoin protocol was made, the nodes are actually the processors of the transactions, right? And not just a security thing. How do you reconcile those two ideas?
So hash power, again, this goes to the presumption that there's a perfect system that you can build, right? And then the perfect system, the one that has all of the technical attributes that you want it to have, is the better system. That's not really the case. Bitcoin is not that. Like Satoshi Nakamoto explained in the white paper, nodes, attacker nodes, and honest nodes. He used 3 different differentiators. And so an attacker node, like when you hear there's an attacker node, you picture a person attacking the network, right?
Right.
Like you have to. Somebody needs to make the node do something bad. The node is not malicious. The person is malicious.
Yes.
Now, in response to that, you need an honest node to fight them, which means you need somebody to program their computer to fight the attacker. If nobody does anything, the attacker will win every time, because that's the nature of the system. And so BTC people think that no, we need all these nodes and we need tons and tons of hash power, and that's what security comes from. Right. And the BSV people would say, absolutely not. It doesn't matter how much hash power you have. Hashing is a signal designed to make sure that your blocks don't just get arbitrarily orphaned and stuff like that. But it's a signal saying that, like, hey, I'm willing to compete for these transactions and protect the network. And so BSV was attacked a couple of times last year. And when it was attacked, we just orphaned the attacker. Like, the attacker tried to push a bunch of invalid blocks, and we just said, no, we're not going to build on your blocks. That's it. You are forked off the network. And they lost about 250 grand trying to attack the network. And then they were complaining, saying, hey, you cheated. You can't just orphan my blocks. I have more hash power than you. To which I said, hey, just because you broke into my house doesn't mean it's your house. Like, what are you talking about? Like, I am going to drag you out of my house or shoot you or something. Like, it's my house, whether you've taken it or not. Like, I have the right to take it back by any means I see fit. And so that's the economic incentive of the network for people who are invested in the network to fight to keep the network secure. And that's plain and simple. Like, the BTC hash power is just it's just fake. They don't even use it for governance. They're like, are they going to allow, like, if I came up with more hash power and destroyed BTC, they're just going to let it happen and say, oh, well, I guess we lost. I don't think so.
Interesting. When you get that wider perspective, then you understand some things are wonky and others are just ideologically run. And when I was looking at it, and honestly, I was thinking, when I was looking at Elon Musk and he was promoting the Dogecoin, and he said numbers of transactions, fast confirmation, and lowest fees. And I was like, yeah, this is the correct approach. And then this BTC influencer said, what Elon didn't understand is money can't be changed. He wrote the bearish thing, the bullish case of Bitcoin thing. And I was like, okay, interesting. But it doesn't work, because I keep telling my friends, like, 6 to 7 transactions per second can't handle the world. And that's like a fact, right? And when Craig's like,
can't even handle a city. Like, you couldn't deploy that in Nashville and have everybody use it.
Right. So we already see the end, right? That it's not going to happen. It's going to be like a South Sea Pearl type of thing, catastrophe, and pretty interesting scene to watch. Anyway, moving forward, I just wanted to ask you, right, about this mining thing. You said you were attacked, and people would say, oh, BSV was attacked, reorg, blah, blah, blah. What does it mean? Like, people just throw out words and hard to understand.
Yeah, so people treat reorgs as if they're bad. Reorgs are just a fundamental aspect of Bitcoin. Like, if I mine a block at roughly the same time that somebody else mines a block, you have what's called an orphan race. And so maybe I build 2 or 3 blocks, or maybe I build a 1 gigabyte block, but another miner builds two 500 megabyte blocks that have the same transactions in them. Which one's the better block? It's debatable, right? Like, I don't know. I'm not in a position to make that value judgment. And so the interesting thing is that you need to decide somehow, and how you decide is generally hash power plus propagation plus a couple of other things. But the network can be weird like that. Like, sometimes we will beat Tal mining for a block, and they have 100 times more hash power than us, but we'll find a block at the same time and we win. And like, that's just like that's the probability of the network. And so it just kind of is what it is. But when you reorg, sometimes it can be like, we'll build a block and somebody will build a block on it. Right. Somebody will build a third block, but then maybe Tal, rather than letting us have 3 little blocks, maybe they'll bring in a bunch of hash power and mine 1 big block that has all of our transactions in it. And in BTC, they would treat that like it's an attack. but it's not an attack. That's just how Bitcoin works. Like if the other miners decide, you know what, we're going to build on Tal's big block instead of GorillaPool and Mempool and some of the other like the littler companies that mine blocks, like we're just not going to mine, we're not going to go with those blocks. We're going to build on Tal's block. And so that is what's called a reorganization of the blockchain. And nobody loses any transactions in that situation. If you're a user, you don't even know that it happened.
Right.
So if you sent a transaction, it would be in both versions of that chain. It doesn't matter which one wins to the user. So what it means is we need to be better at competing. We need to get better at cooperating, and this and that. And that's the basic understanding of what a reorg means.
Interesting. So users, don't be scared. You're not affected. This is like a node war thing. If you're not like a miner, then it's not your problem.
Yep.
Right. Awesome. So Kurt, thank you very much, for your time here. You've been very generous with your thoughts. What are your final messages, especially for young people in the Philippines and ASEAN listening about this? How could they put like a 1 foot forward and get a tour of this BSV thing?
I mean, learn to program. Like there's a ton of opportunities to build businesses that allow, it doesn't matter where you're at, whether you're from, way out in the middle of nowhere, or whether you're one of the rich kids living in a tower in Makati or something. Like right. you can build an application on BSV and you can get customers from around the world today. The best way to do that might be to learn how to do some basic JavaScript programming and start to build applications, start to use the tools, get on Twitch, play the Haste arcade games, get a hand cash wallet. Just do it. Like you have very little risk to jump in and try something new while it's still young. And, the $50 that you make, playing games and goofing around and stuff might turn into a massive fortune in the future. But somebody's got to build it. And I think places like the Philippines are a great opportunity where the money isn't super strong. You can send around transactions that are less than a US penny all day long. And, so using it for cash on the street or whatever else is also an option. But you can build the world to look like anything you want it to look like using BSV. Like that's the power of Bitcoin.
Wow. There's a lot of huge opportunities for Southeast Asian people to make that leap. I keep telling people like this blockchain thing, especially unbounded BSV, can help you make a leap and maybe even turn your country or your city into one of the most digitally advanced cities in the future. So Kurt, How can they reach you? Where can they find you? Where can they read or watch you?
So I'm all over the place. Twitter is probably the best spot to start. So I'm Kurt Wickert JR on Twitter. You can find me at CoinGeek.com. You can find me at KurtWickertJR.com. I'm all over YouTube and other people's shows and stuff too. So if you search my name, a bunch of stuff will pop up. But people can send me DMs on Twitter and things too. If you have specific questions, I'm happy to help.
Awesome. So thank you very much, Kurt, for being here and enlightening us. And I hope to have you in future episodes to dig deeper and the other businesses coming up. Appreciate your time.